This is part 4 of Introduction to Photoshop, Designing a Magazine Cover, and we're going to pick up where we left off with finishing out the design layout of our magazine cover. So let's go ahead and begin. I'm going to go to my Move tool, and I'm thinking, let's go ahead and delete the temporary Trap CG logo. So I'm going to trash this, and we're going to go ahead and get our real logo. So now if you're running newer versions of Photoshop, you should be able to just grab your Illustrator file, if it's an Illustrator image or logo, and you can drag and drop it. It could be a PDF as well. Photoshop accepts PDF files. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and here's my image. So I can position it, I can scale it, etc., etc. Now, if you can't do that, like let's say you tried it and it won't accept your Illustrator file because you're running an older version of Photoshop in Illustrator, what you could do is open up Illustrator. So let's go ahead and do that now. So here's my Illustrator file, or my logo I should say, in Illustrator. If I minimize Photoshop, you can see here's Illustrator. Let me bring Photoshop back up, go to Illustrator. Now this should work with at least Photoshop CS6. So you can select the logo, use your black arrow tool, and drag and drop it into Photoshop. All right, so that's another way of getting the logo in. And if that way doesn't work, while you're in Illustrator, just go File, Export, and export it as a PNG TIFF Targa. Now make sure your logo is really big, so that way when you bring it into Photoshop, it's not going to need to be scaled up, because if you export it as an image file and you scale it up, it's going to start looking kind of crappy. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to hit Cancel, jump back to Photoshop. So it really doesn't matter how you bring it in, just as long as you can get it into Photoshop. So I'm going to start renaming my layers. Let me double click this one and call it Logo. And I'll call this one Head. And the other two are fine. These are our design layout ideas. Let me bring the logo to the top. And let's go ahead and position it. Of course, we can go Edit, Retransform, hold down Shift. And voila. That's probably too big, so let me scale it back down a little bit. Now, because it is a quasi-vector, I can scale it up and down without really losing any type of quality to it. Again, I'm saying quasi-vector because I can't go in and play with the anchor points. Just kind of fake vector image. Anyway, moving forward, so our logo's in place, our head is in place. Let's go ahead and get some text in here because I think we're going to have to reposition this head. Here's some text that I'm going to use. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of this. I'm not going to actually do this in the final layout, but I'm just showing you the different ways that you can bring in text. So I'm going to copy this. You can actually type out text if you want to. So I'm going to hit Control-C on the keyboard or right-click and copy. Jump back over to my Photoshop, activate the text tool, and I'm going to click and drag to create a text box, just like this, and I'm going to hit Control-V, and that's going to paste it. Now let's go ahead and select our Move tool, set our text color to black. There we go. And Arial for right now is fine. So you can see here that in the text box, it conforms the text. So if I drag the text box over, it's going to push the text over. So that's one way I can control where the text is visible. It's kind of nifty and helpful. And then in here, I can actually increase or decrease the size of each element to break this up. So there's another way of conforming text to a specific area. So let me go ahead and delete this. And I'm going to take the pen tool, and I'm going to click, and I'm going to hold down Shift so I can draw a straight line and click to her hair. And then I'm going to click down her hair, maybe around her eyebrows, inside her eye, and down her cheek, something like this. Of course, I can be much more specific about how the line is being drawn. So once I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and take the stroke, set it back down to, let's say, 3, maybe even set the alignment to centered. I'm actually going to hide this layer here in a bit. I'm just showing you the text area. So let me use my white arrow tool and just straighten out this one corner. So let me drag select over it, hold down Shift and the arrows so I can shift it over. So that looks about straight. Okay, so this is my new text area. Now when I hit the text tool and roll over this area, you can see I'm getting a dotted circle around my text tool. I'm going to click and hit Control-V. And what it's going to do is use this shape as a conformant to the text. So if I go, just keep typing Secret Lab in the base of my house and no one knows. And you can see here that it automatically keeps tabbing down to create the text. So that's pretty cool. It's very useful. And then all I need to do is hide the shape layer, and it's still conformed, so I can still type. I will one day rule the world. And you can see here that what it's done is it's showing me an outline of the path. In fact, I should jump over to here, and you can see now there's a path in my path tabs that the text is using. But when I click off of it, I can't see it, which is really nice. So that's another way of conforming your text to a specific shape. I'm still not going to use that. I think what I'm going to probably use is a combination of the text box and then copying and pasting individual pieces. So let me go ahead and drag this to the trash can. I'm going to drag the shape layer to the trash can. Don't need those two. Okay, so first of all, I know my head's way too far over just looking at laying out that text. So I'm going to bring it back some, maybe to about there, maybe up a little bit, something like that. Yeah, maybe down a little bit. I don't know. Still play with it. Okay, so I'm going to jump back over to some of my text. I'm going to grab the top piece first, Control C, and I'm going to take my text tool, and I am going to click and drag and create a text box. Control V. Okay, so this is my first text box, Human Genome Experiment. Because this is going to be a title of a particular page, I'm going to probably bring this up to, let's say, font or size 30. And you can see here, increase in size. And I'm thinking that I'm going to use a different font, something more mechanical and different. So when selecting fonts, I like to just click on the font tab, go to the very top font, click on it, and just start scrolling through the various different fonts that I have on my computer. Thinking that's kind of interesting. And there's different types of this. So I'm probably going to go with this, and I'm going to go with a bold because this is a title, and I'm not going to go with this. I don't like the rounded edges that the bold created. So let me just, whoops, I went right back to the top. This started with a C of some sort. Let me just keep flipping through these. Maybe this will be nice. And it does have a bold option. There we go. I do want to look for a font that has a bold option so I can separate the title versus the base text. Okay, so now that I've found the actual font that I want, and it looks to be, yeah, I think bold is fine. Okay, so let's go ahead and switch over to increasing the font size. I think I can go a little bit bigger, maybe 35. And you can see that my text piece disappears, and that's because my text box is not big enough. All right, so now I have it at 35. Let me go ahead and move this over a little bit. 35 might be too big, but we'll keep playing. And let's say the spacing, which is, what do they call this, leading. And the reason why they call it leading is because of, in the old days when they used to have paper print, they used to have these lead spaces that they would add between the top text and the bottom text. So they call it leading. I learned that from my boss, actually, at the job I'm at. So anyway, moving forward, let's go ahead and change the spacing right here. It's set to auto. So I'm going to set this to 35, the size of my font. 35, enter on the keyboard. And that's better. Maybe even bring it down a little bit more. 30. And that's definitely better. Now there's also something called kerning, and that's the space between the letters. Now there's an overall option right here, which is right now set to 0. So let's say I put this to negative 100. You can see here it pulls all the letters together. Now it's not squashing the text, so it's not scaling the text, it's just changing the spaces between the letters. So let's go negative 50 and negative 25. That's a little bit better. So here was 0. I think that's too much space. Negative 25. And there might be some pieces that need to manually adjust. So if you click the text tool and you click in between the letters and you hold down Alt on the keyboard and use your arrows, you can manually adjust spacing between letters. Something like that. Let's see what else. For right now, that's probably good. You can get really picky about the spacing between letters, but I think that's good for right now. Okay, so human genome experiment. Let's keep this right here. I'm going to go back to my other text, and this is the bottom part. So Control C. I'm going to draw another text box. Oops, did not mean to select that one. Just like this, Control V. Now this one I am not going to have bold, so I'm going to automatically go to my move tool so I can change everything in the text box. And let's come up to here, regular, and the size I'm thinking maybe 24. Too much, let's go 20. And that's better. So let's drag this up. And what I'm going to do is for my rulers, if you're not seeing your rulers, I think it's Alt-R or Control-R. Control-R will show you rulers. I am going to roll over the ruler and click and drag to create a guideline. And place it right about there. Let me turn off View, turn off Snap real quick so I can align it specifically to the edge of my top font here. And then I'm going to go back to View, return on Snap, and then I'm going to snap this to the edge. And it's fighting me, so I'll just move it manually. Okay, so that's better. And of course, I've got a lot of adjusting in this. Let's go ahead and set the spacing between them to 20. That's much better. Thinking that's going to work. Probably capitalize Nazi. Maybe even secret lab. Now I can get really creative with this and make new bigger to make it a focused word, and maybe make Nazi bigger or even change different colors and stuff, but I'm not going to worry about right now. This is not really a font tutorial. This is more of designing your magazine cover. Okay, so let's zoom out to see our document. I think that's working. Now again, we're viewing this like at 28%, so we're not viewing it at 100%. And I can even probably go a little bit smaller with this text here. So with it selected, make sure it's selected here. I'm going to switch it back down to, let's say, 15. And let me go ahead and switch the spacing to 15. That might work a little bit more. It depends on how much text I'm going to add to my document. Or work a little bit more, work a little bit better, I should say. Okay, so that's my first set of text. Let me organize this so I have these two first. Let me go ahead and select them both by holding down Shift and clicking on their layers. Control J on the keyboard to duplicate them. I'm going to drag this below. And I'm going to use my arrow tools to drag it down and Shift, or I can just manually drag it down and hold down Shift. Okay, so second text information, I'm going to put it here. And let's jump back over to here. I'm going to copy human cyborg integration. I'm going to bring this over too. It doesn't need to be so wide. And I'm actually going to bring the base up as well. I'm going to do that with this one as well. Text tool, so I don't have extra boxes sitting around that could cause me to select something I shouldn't be selecting. Let's grab this one, text tool. Let's see where this box goes. All right, that works. Okay, so let's jump back over to the notepad file. And I'm going to grab this. I think I'm going to get rid of the or in this one. Yeah, I don't think the or is going to really work. So let me get rid of that. Pull this up. Bring this in. All right, so you can see here I'm really starting to lay out my text. Let's maybe do one more. So I don't have another one in my list here, but I remember something from like a Discover magazine or something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control J, drag this down. And of course, you would actually have someone providing this content for you in a real world environment. You wouldn't be making it up, but for your own demo and portfolio work, you would probably be making this up. So let me go ahead and select this, unless you're copying a magazine design. I'm going to call this Tech on, I'm going to use on the Tech on the Brain. And by the way, real quick, sorry, if I hit this check mark here, it will solidify what I've done, and then I can go on to the next one, and I think Control Enter does the same thing. And then I think, let's see here, the text was, I think that works. Flexible electronics that could change the shape of medicine forever. And maybe even actually put a page number. So let's say this is on page 20. And let me copy this, Control C. And I'm going to hit Control Enter so I can set that in stone. Go to the next one. Space, Control V. And this one's going to be on page, let's say 25. Control Enter. And this one's going to be on page 50. And I'll actually put a period here. Now, if I was being witty, I would actually use numbers on these if I don't have specific pages that would represent some other aspect of science or history or something, just to really get people thinking about, did you purposely put these numbers in? Were they accident? Just to give something more thought. Okay, so I think that works. And then of course I'd probably cram a barcode here. So let's go ahead and save this for now. The next step I want to take is pull the head more into the background. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the head layer. I'm going to click on new layer here. I'm going to make sure I'm on my paintbrush tool. I'm going to jump over to my paintbrush settings, make sure it's on a soft brush, no spacing, and a fairly large brush. So now I'm just going to tap in white along the edges to get this head to look like that lighting is bouncing off the background and hitting the side areas of her face. And I might have to zoom out a little bit so I can actually get the brush in here. And then same thing with the back area. So, and if I think I've taken stuff too far, I can always go back in with my eraser tool. And I actually think I want to have the neck kind of fade away into the white. So let me go ahead and just tap in something like that. Okay, so let's zoom back in here. And you can see what it's done is it really pulls the head into the environment. And it's probably a little hot up here. So let me go ahead and activate my eraser, make sure I'm set to the same type of brush, soft, no spacing. Just kind of pull it back out a little bit. Try to clean up the nose some, because it doesn't need to be really on the nose, just on this side of the face. And again, I can turn it on and off just to see what it's doing. Okay, so now I'm thinking about adding the border. So let's go ahead and activate the shape tool, and I'm going to make sure I'm set to rectangle tool, and I'm going to click and drag. I'm not going to worry about it being set to fit. I want to make sure that I have no fill, and let's go ahead and click on the stroke. Black for right now is fine. In fact, actually I'm going to switch over to the same color as the logo. All right, and then I'm thinking, do I want the same color? No, you know what? I think I want black actually. Make a black border, and the size 10 looks good, and I've also set my align to inside. So you have center, outside, inside. I'm going to do inside because I want to align these points up to the corners. So I'm going to go back to my move tool, edit, free transform. For some reason my keyboard shortcuts aren't working. So I'll just use the menus. And I've got snap on, by the way, view, snap. So it snaps into place. Now I'm also getting these purple guidelines popping up. If you don't have that, that's okay. That's only I think that's 2014 and above for CC. It might only be 2015 and above, but I'm pretty sure it's 2014 and above. So let me set that in place, enter in the keyboard. Apply. My keyboard isn't seriously working. Let me test something real quick. Okay, anyway, moving forward. So I've got my border in, but I'm thinking that I want to have the head be on top of the border and the neck be below. So what I'm going to do is duplicate my border. In fact, let me call this, let's see. All right, border. And let me duplicate this, Control J, or I can drag and drop to the piece of paper. So I'm going to take this one and I'm going to put it below the head. I'll call this border back. Okay, so the top border, I'm going to use my selection tool here, and I'm going to drag over the area where it's just above the neck, and I'm going to hit mask. Okay, so that works and it doesn't. Like you can see here, that's pulled above the head, but I'm getting the white layer here. So let me go to here and erase this. So that cleaned up that, but I'm getting the issue back here. And I do have to have some kind of fall off because the head's got some painting on it. So let me go ahead and use the eraser tool and tab it in. Something like that, maybe. A little bit further back. And I got to clean up the hair a little bit there. I don't like the way the hair looks. But that's actually working right there. Now I do want to clean up this top area as well. So let me go back to my eraser tool. Erase the top. And I do need to have it fall back a little bit. So let me just increase the size of the brush and tap it out. Okay, so that works. So now I have the border set in place. And I get this kind of three-dimensional look with the head coming out or behind the border and then in front of the border. Let me go ahead and fix the hair real quick down here. So let me jump down, click on the head. I'm going to create a new mask layer. Okay, so with the mask layer selected, I'm going to jump over to my paintbrush and I'm going to jump over to my settings because this is way too big. And I'm going to choose the soft edge brush again. I'm going to decrease the spacing and I'm also going to decrease the size. Probably something like that. And then I'm just going to come in here and start getting rid of all this extra white that you're seeing. Now I have shape dynamics activated with my pen and set to pin pressure, by the way. That helps me create these finer strokes. And again, I'm using the Wacom tablet for this. So it's just about spending the time to making it look good. Okay, so now this is a very blurred section of the shot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over to this tool here. This is a blur tool. Make sure you've clicked and hold it down to click blur. And I still have the mask layer selected. Then I'm just going to blur this out. And I'm actually going to jump over to the head layer as well. And again, my head layer has been rasterized, so I can blur this out. If yours is not rasterized, just right click on it and say rasterize layer, if it's still a vector shape. Let me go ahead and zoom out. All right, so that looks a lot better, and I think we're coming along. So let's go ahead and save this. I want to create a secondary border, a slight thin light blue line in between the black and the white. Now before I do that, what I want to do is actually set this paint layer to affect the head only and not the border as well. So I'm going to hold down Alt and I'm going to click in between these layers, and that way this is only going to affect this layer right here. So it locks it into this layer and you can see it no longer affects the black border, which it could be a bad thing or a good thing for right now. We'll leave it. So I'm going to take the border and I'm going to hit Control. Let me take the base border since it's without a mask. So Control J. I'm going to call this blue border. And I'm going to switch. Let me go to this tool right here so I can get the settings. I'm going to switch this one to a blue. And let's go to here. I'm going to switch this to 2. And let's see, 2. Let's change the mode. Let's stick with the way it's aligned. So with this border now, what I'm going to do is hit Control T and move it down. In fact, to be honest, the best way to really move this is to view it at 100%. So I'm going to hit zoom in all the way, Control T, and move it to where I'm just touching this edge. There we go. All right, so that works. Now let me go to this side, Control T. Oops, Control Z. Let me grab it just by the side. There it is. So I'm going to drag this over to be like that, and then let's go to the bottom. Drag it up. Should be good. And last but not least, and I'm going to have to pull this to where I can see. Okay. Apply. All right, let me zoom all the way back out. Whoops. played with the Photoshop itself. All right, so that's looking good. Now I want to have it on top of the neck area, so let's go ahead and duplicate this. So Control J, and I'll call this first one blue border back, and this one I'm going to call blue border top. Let me bring it up, and I'm going to click on this mask layer here. I'm going to hold down Control and Alt, and I'm going to drag it to this layer. This copies the mask and pastes it to this layer. The next thing I want to do is play with the spacing in between these texts because it doesn't look right. So I'm going to go ahead and click this text box to select it. Let me turn on auto select. And I'm going to click the bottom option as well. I'm going to turn off auto select so that way I know I'm just moving this. Now when I move these, you can see I'm getting values, and this is I think Adobe Photoshop CC 2014 and above. It might even just be 2015 and above. But it gives me values of distances between other options that are close to it. And so I know this is exactly the same distance as these. If you do not have that option, another way of doing it is to create a shape, draw out the shape between the text sizes, and then use this as a reference. Like move it down and move it as it uses a reference for spacing. Let's see here. So I have that. I think I want to do a little bit more with the text, maybe create a text box coming out from behind. So I'm going to come down here and I'll put it even below the borders. So I'm going to go ahead and go new layer. I'm going to create a text box or a shape box. I'm going to make sure it's set to no stroke. So I turned off my stroke and set my fill to color. And let me click and drag. I can go all the way over just to see what that looks like, and don't like it. So let me hit Control T, bring it back, probably something about there. Let me zoom in here. All right, so I'm going to hit Control T, bring this up just a tad. In fact, actually, I'm going to come up to View, turn off snapping. And I think that will work. So we're viewing this not quite at 100. This is 100%. And might give it a little bit more air on the bottom, so I'm just going to move it down a little bit. That looks about right. Okay, so now let me zoom out. I have the tab put in place. It's looking good. So let me go ahead and call this text box 1. And let me hit Control J to duplicate it. This one's going to be text box 2. And make sure auto select is, go to my move tools, not on, so I can just move it straight down. And let me zoom in here. And let me hit Control T, drag this over. Something like that. Let's go ahead and do one more. Control J. Probably you should call this text box blue. And let me move this one down. Zoom in. Position it. About there, Control T. By the way, the Control Y that I just accidentally hit Control Y, and that switches into this like CMYK mode, and that's the print color mode option. So if you accidentally see things gray out like this, that's because you flipped into a different color mode, and it's Control Y as a shortcut key. Something that I accidentally hit every once in a while. I should point that out. Okay, so there we go. That's looking good. So human genome, cyborg. So now my tabs are in. That's given a little bit more life. I could even, if I wanted to, add a little bit of blue paint to the side of her face to make it look like light is bouncing off these tabs and hitting her face if I wanted that type of interaction. I can add a drop shadow to these tabs. So let's say I click the top one. I'm going to double click on it. And let's say I go drop shadow right here. Okay. And now I'm going to set the angle to maybe something this way. And I'm just going to type in 777. And I'm going to hit OK. And let's zoom in at 100%. So there's the drop shadow. Let me go back into the effect. Click on drop shadow. The opacity is pretty low, so I can bring this up, make it a little bit darker. And of course I can increase these numbers to any value I want. If I wanted a further distance, if I wanted it more of a spread, less of a spread. So more blur, or the size I should say. So that's a drop shadow effect. It's not too bad. It's not amazing either. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it. I don't like it. That's another way you can add a little bit more dimension to your shot. Now I'm debating about adding a second tab below these, a different color though. I do want to do this though. I don't like this. Let me go ahead and change. Let me switch auto select on. Click on these text pieces and switch this color to white. I think that would be more interesting. Yeah, that looks better. All right, so let's go ahead and save the file. Let's go ahead and get the final element into our shot, which is the barcode. I'm going to make sure I have the logo selected, by the way, so I'm on the top of the layer list. I'm going to jump over to the internet, and I'm going to type in barcode generator, and the first link should be fine. And I'm going to type in issue 7. I can go issue number 7. You can look up various different barcode designs if you want. I'm going to right click on this and say copy image. And in here I'm going to hit Control V. And it should paste, and it pasted it all the way down at the bottom because I accidentally selected the background image. So here's the barcode right here. I'm going to hit Control T in the keyboard. I'm going to make sure View Snap is on. I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to scale it up, and I'm going to reposition it here in the side. Something like that should be fine. Maybe a little bit less. And I'm going to hit Enter. So you can see here it locks in the size. There we go. Maybe bring it up just a bit. Okay, so let me zoom in here. Now, just to show you, let me double click the zoom icon. This is a pretty low res image, so my suggestion would be rebuild this in Photoshop. Just use your box tool, create an outer box with an edge, then create smaller boxes on the inside with no stroke. And then type out the word issue number 7 right here. So I'm going to go ahead and skip all that. Don't want to waste your time. Okay, so now that we have that element in, I should probably call it barcode. Let me zoom out. Okay, so layout wise, I'm not liking the position of the head, so I'm going to raise it. I don't like how far down it is, so I'm going to jump all the way down to the paint layer and the head layer. And I'm going to make sure I turn off auto select. I'm going to drag these guys up, both of them at the same time. And maybe a little too high. I think it's kind of interesting that the G is close to the I in this scenario. This little nice wrap. That's kind of cool. And that should be high enough. Now you can see here I'm having a problem down at the bottom. That's okay because I'm going to paint this section out. So I'm going to jump over to the paint layer. I'm going to click on paintbrush. And I'm going to make sure that I have a soft brush, no spacing, and it's a large brush. So let me zoom out a little bit more. And let me hit Alt and right click. Come on, there we go. A little bit bigger brush and start typing in the white at the base of the neck. In fact, let me go ahead and use the eraser tool and tap it out in the base to get rid of that hard line that was there. Then re-go in with the paintbrush. And the idea is to pull it into the background. Yeah, that looks nice. Let me double click and zoom. Yeah, I think that's going to work. Okay, you can see here there's a slight issue with the corner area that we cut. So we're going to jump over to that layer, which was border, blue border. And all we need to do is take the paintbrush, make sure we're on the mask layer, and make sure we set the paintbrush size to something much smaller. Definitely better. And we're going to set the paint to white. Again, we're on the mask layer. I'm just going to paint that back in. Okay, so that way it's on top. And I think that should work. Make sure that's set. Probably should do that to the black layer as well. There we go. So that's good to go. So that cleaned up that issue. The other thing that you probably want to do, which I haven't mentioned, is use the blur tool on the edges. Because the image is slightly blurred on the back side, and we can add a little bit of blur. So you click on the image layer here, click on the blur tool here, and just kind of blur out the back edges, so it's not so harsh. Pull that back a little bit. Eyelashes pull back a little bit. There we go, that should be good enough. All right, so let me go ahead and double click the hand icon to zoom all the way out. Okay, so that's definitely better for the position of the head. Now the Trap CG logo, I still don't like it, so let me go ahead and turn on auto select, select the layer or the logo, click Control T. I'm going to scale it down a little bit, bring it over a little bit more, probably something like that, and that's better. Now I'm going to I think maybe a bar going across the bottom here. So I'm going to click on the bar tool here, make sure my fill is set to the same color as my logo and no stroke. That should be good. And let me go ahead and just click and draw. Really thin box. Okay, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to layer it all the way down to the bottom. I'll call this logo bar 1 for now. All right, and let me just move it up. Now this is supposed to be on the bottom. There we go. So it should be behind any border. And that should work right about there. Okay, so that's better. So that's one layout design. I think that's pretty much it. I could add something over here in the corner just to fill the space. It's kind of lacking, but overall I think that works, and it should give you a good idea of how to use all the tools, from the text tools to the tools in Photoshop. So I'm going to take all these elements that we have, so from logo bar all the way up to logo, and I'm going to drag them to the folder icon, and it drops them all inside a folder. I'll call this design 1. Now what I could do, drag and drop this to the new paper icon, create design 2. Let's go ahead and save this. I'm going to hide design 1, and I'm going to look at the design 2, or I should say layer 1. It's written here. I think I renamed this. For some reason it switched back. But anyway, so this is my design 2. Let me go ahead and work on design 2 now. So I'm going to open this folder up, and I'm going to start deleting a bunch of stuff. Let's see, anything that's not content. So let's take out the border stuff. And back border. I'm going to take out most of these boxes as well. Just keep one, because I'm going to use it. Let's get rid of this one. So that should be it. Oh, no, I want the logo bar to go away. All right, so I'm going to start with this text box that we have here. I'm going to call it blue bar. I'm going to hit Control T on the keyboard and stretch it way out. And scale it up a bit. Hit Enter. I'm going to drag and drop, create a new one. And I'm going to move this one down, give it some space, something like that. But this time I'm going to make it a little bit wider, so Control T. And let's go maybe 150% wider or close to it. That's good enough. And then I'm going to hit Control J, which is the shortcut key to make a duplicate. And let's go ahead and bring this down as well. Okay, and then hit Control T and 150%. That's good enough. Okay, so now that I have all three, I can hit Control E on the keyboard to merge all three, or I can come up to here and say merge shapes right here. So it's up to you if you want to merge them together. I think I'm going to leave them apart right now. So let me hit Control T, oops, Control Z. Make sure I have all three layers selected. Control T, and let's position this into the corner. So maybe something like that. How do I want to line this up? Let's try something like that. I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to hit Control J to make another copy or set. And this one is going to be, I'm going to put it on top for now. So I'll bring it all the way up above the human image, drag the set down, and hit Control T. Let's rotate this all the way around. So maybe something like this. And I can play with, it looks like I don't need the bottom bar. I can play with maybe putting one of these bars behind the girl. That doesn't look right. Let's bring that back up. Let's try putting this one behind the girl. That's more interesting. Maybe move it a little bit though. So something like that. Okay, then the question is, do I want to keep these bars blue because my logo is the same color and I don't want to change my logo, so it looks like I'm going to have to change the color of these bars. Now there's a couple ways to do this. I can, of course, select all the bars and switch over to the shape tool and just change the color this way. So let's say if we chose a red and I need to select 2 more bars in there, I can do it that way. There's another way of doing it, and that is to create a layer style. So let me just click on one, double click. And this one I'm going to call, it's called Color Overlay. And this is where I can actually apply an overlay effect of a particular color. And then what I could do, as you can see here, Effects, Overlay, I'm going to right click on that and say Copy Layer Style. And then I can paste it to whatever layers I want. All right, so that's another way of doing it. It's up to you. It doesn't matter which way. There isn't one way better than the other. So let me select all the blue bars. Let me get rid of the effects that I applied. Okay, so now that I have all the blue bars selected, I'm just going to use the vector option. And in this case, I think maybe just black. That might be interesting. And of course, I can go through, what does gray look like? I can click through these different color samples. Just to see if there's a color in here that really sticks out. I kind of like black, but it gives it kind of a prison look, and that's not what I'm looking for. So maybe a dark red. And the logo is still kind of hard to read. Of course, I'm going to have to change my text. Anything that's a white text. So it's human, and tech. These things are white. Switch them to black right now so we can see them. Let's see here. Trap CG, definitely not liking the color contrast. Let me see what happens if we put a drop shadow on Trap CG. No, definitely don't like that. So maybe not this color. Let's jump back down to the color bars. Oops. Let's go to the color wheel. Let's go real dark red. Or maybe even keeping it a blue, a real dark blue. Kind of like that more, actually. It's not too distracting now. Okay, so there's some options I can do with the dark blue. I can probably take, let's say, another box. And let me create a layer. Let's create it up here. Actually, create it down here. And create a new layer, click and drag, create a new box. Okay, so I'm going to take this color and I'm going to pick the blue that I chose. And let's free transform this, Control T, bring it back a little bit. And let me just duplicate this, Control J. I'm going to turn off auto select so I can just drag it straight down and frame each one of these. And let me take these two top ones and hit Control T, and drag this back. Maybe even drag this one back. And change the text color again. So let's go back up. Human, tech, white. Then I got to figure out what I'm going to do here. Okay, so maybe on this one, let me come down to, it's going to be this bar. I'm going to hit Control J. I'm going to put this bar below. I'm going to change this bar to white. Oops, right here, white. And I'm going to hit Control T. Position it. So now it's got the cutout here. It's a little bit more interesting. I don't like the way the logo is sitting in here. So let's go ahead and save this real quick. Oops, not save as, save. Cancel, file, save. All right, I think what I'm going to do is get rid of these two bars. So let me turn on auto select, select, and hit delete, delete. And that gives me an interesting layout look right there. And then maybe even take, let's say like this white bar. In fact, let me just create a new white bar below the logo. So we come up to the logo, new layer, drag and drop it below. And I'm going to drag and drop this white bar. Change the color to white. And that's definitely more interesting. For sure. Of course, I'd want to rename it. But anyway, that gives us a whole new layout look. And all I had to do was copy the original design because it kept all my content. And then I get to keep playing around with the elements. So I think I'm going to call it good for right now. There isn't really much else I want to cover in Photoshop as an introduction. We've pretty much gone over most of the tools. When we were cleaning up the face, we played with the clone stamp tools and didn't really talk about burn and dodge. Those these tools right here will actually darken or lighten an area. So let's say if I use burn, let me go to the face layer. And again, it can't be a vector layer, so make sure it's rasterized. And then I can come in here and darken out some areas to make them a little bit more extreme, like under the jaw. I can probably pull the eye back a little bit, bring out the nose a little bit more. So you can see here, let me go ahead and jump back to my history, just to show the difference. So that's burn tool, and then the opposite is dodge tool. And this will allow you to brighten areas up to make them more brighter. I mean, pretty self-explanatory. Let me go to history. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and undo all that. I'm actually not that against some of the dodge or burn tool. Okay. So that's dodge and burn. Paint bucket fills an area. You have a gradient tool, which is kind of nice. This will allow you to paint a gradient. So let me jump all the way down to the bottom and create a new layer. And with the gradient tool selected, right now it's black and white. I can click and drag, and I can create a gradient in my environment. In this case, I'd want to go in the opposite direction. And of course, this isn't going to work with the paint layer I have on the head, so I'd have to change all that. But I can even come in, click in here, and choose colors or set my own color values. I can have alpha gradients as well. So let's say, and this is based off the color palette over here. So if I switch this to, let's say, black, and then come back in here, you can see now it's black to alpha. So if I do this, black to alpha. I can change it to, I can even say red. Well, let me actually do that. Let me change this to red. And now you can see, oops, let me Control Z, switch to a red to alpha, click OK. You can see here now it's red to alpha. And I've got the modes of the gradient options here. So let me go ahead and undo a lot of this. New layer. So I can click and drag and create a round gradient. Control Z, I can create a line gradient. And this is a kind of reflect gradient. And then a star gradient. Okay, so lots of gradient options in here. And like I said, you can choose multi-colors, and you can come in here and add your own colors. All you need to do is double click, change the color. You can actually click in here to add more markers. So maybe I want some green, and click OK. Now when I create this gradient, I get all these colors. Sorry, real quick side note. I use the eraser tool on the actual glow or the white paint layer. That's what I don't know why I keep renaming this, but this doesn't stick. White paint. And I did it near the neck, so here's the original. This is before I started ranting, and here's the after. So I just kind of cleaned up the neck area where the bar's at, around the mouth, around the eye, a little bit in the forehead. And that way it matches. Again, it's all about matching the environment a little bit more. So that made it definitely match this setup. So sorry about that. Go ahead and play around with erasing the paint layer out. The last thing that we need to do is either save this out for the web or save it out to send to a client. There's many different save options. We can go File, Save As, and you click right here and you can choose the various different formats. So PNG is a good format if you need alpha channel, you're going to put it up on the web or even send to clients. JPEG is pretty much the industry standard for almost everybody. So almost anybody can, or everybody could read a JPEG file. If you're going to put it up on the web, JPEG or PNG are probably your best bet. Now, if you want best quality, your TIFFs and your targets are going to be really good options. The downside to these is that they're huge file sizes. So PNGs and JPEGs give you really good file sizes, but they compress them a little bit more. And TIFFs and targets pretty much are no compression, but they're huge file sizes. Not everybody are going to be able to open these. Now, this is the new age of technology. However, I don't even think iPads can open up TIFFs and targets correctly. So if you're trying to save it to where an iPad can open it up, then PNG or JPEG. So just keep that in mind and you should be good to go. So let's say I want to save it out as a JPEG. I can give it a name. So in this case, I'm going to call it Trap CG Mag Cover 1, and this one's actually 2. So Mag Cover 2.jpg, and click Save. And click OK. And that last window was for quality. And in fact, let me go ahead and save number 1. File, Save As, JPEG. Get rid of this piece. Trap Magazine Cover 1 and save. And in this case, right here where it says image quality, I can lower the image quality and it's going to lower the file size. So, but again, you're lowering image quality. So if you really need to get it a small file size, you can bring this down. Otherwise, 12 should be fine. And that's maximum. You can choose automatic settings as well. Low, medium, high, and maximum. And everything else should be good. So let's go ahead and click OK. And there you have it. Let me go ahead and pull up my folder. So here's my 2 JPEG images. And like I said, these can be sent to anybody you want or put up on your web page as a portfolio piece. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I will catch you guys next time.